Hey people, Ben from Deep Fry Dub here. I just thought I would make this little video about my live set here. So this is my Ableton set. Obviously, this is the sort of main brains of the operation. And by the way, forgive me if there's a few little glitches and cutouts. My laptop is actually struggling to actually screen record this and run Ableton. So apologies for that. So anyway, this whole live set is controlled with a number of different controllers. First of all, I've got my trusty Akai APC40 here, which is my main controller, like a mixer, and I'm doing all the dubs and stuff from there. Then I'm also using a M Audio trigger finger to trigger some samples, a little Arturia Analog Lab MIDI keyboard, and a microphone. So let me walk you through the live set. So first things first, these first four tracks here are the main instruments here. So I've got kick or bass, depending on the track. Then I've got percussion, which is pretty much all the drums. And then I've got solo A, which is usually vocals, sometimes horns. And then stereo, which is pretty much everything else, including synthesizers, other effects and whatnot. So they're all the main elements here, and you can see that for each song I've got a scene or a row here, and I've already stemmed out from another program. I write most of my tunes in Logic, so that's my sort of DAW of choice, and I perform with Ableton. So I've already stemmed out all the different parts into different stems, and you can see here I've got the bass. In this case, it's bass and possibly just kick. So here's the bass, and then I've got the drums. Bass doesn't come in for a while. And then I've got Vox and stereo. I'll just play the whole thing, and let me just sort this out. So here's the drums on percussion A, and then I've got stereo stuff, synthesizers here on stereo A. I've got vocals. Number 4 here in this particular tune, and then bass, which isn't coming in yet. Okay, so that's coming in a bit later on, but you get the idea. So I'll turn those all down. Okay, so that's the basic idea. All of these songs are stemmed, and you can see that some of the songs here I've actually got different parts of the arrangement. So you can see when I trigger a scene for this particular track here, Shine, I've got all these different parts of the song, parts of the arrangement. And the idea here is that if I decide when I'm performing I want to skip to another section, or one section's dragging too much, I can just quickly jump to the next section. And these are all using what are called follow actions. So you can see here, if I click on this clip, that I've got this follow action. So after 53 bars, it's going to play the next clip. Okay, so that's all of these different clips have got follow actions here, so that if I don't trigger any more clips, it's going to play through the whole song. It's just going to play the first part of the arrangement, then the second part, and again, using follow actions, it's going to trigger the next part. Okay, if you're unfamiliar with follow actions, I've actually got a video of that on my Sonic Safari YouTube channel, link in the description. Okay, so that's the main thing, and of course, I'm controlling these with my APC controller, so I can bring the faders up individually for all of these different elements here. I can trigger them. All right, and then bring the elements up or down. All right, so that gives me basic mix control. Turn those down for now. Okay, so they're the different elements of the track. Now, a big part of the Deep Fry Dub sound is all in the dubs, all in the effects. And what I've got here is a number of different effects sends here. You can actually sort of see them here. I've got, first of all, a large reverb. So there's a big reverb. And then I've got my main dub delay, which is this one. Okay, and I've got plenty of control over that. And then there is a second delay, which is more of a pitch delay. So I've got control over the delay time, and I can do fun little tricks like this. Lots of fun. And then finally, I've got a sort of more like a spring reverb for that classic old dub sound. That boingy, sprongy kind of a sound. Okay, so coming back to the main delay here, maybe I'll just do this on the vocals.
I'm down with you.
You see I've got control over the feedback of the delay, so I can keep that ringing out. And I can control the filter on the delay, so I can filter that out. So a big part of what I'm doing is actually riding these the delays and that sort of thing. Cool. Now, looking at these sends, you'll notice that the sends don't actually go straight to the actual sends here. So if I look, for example, at this delay one, you notice that here is the actual delay send and return. You'll notice that there's actually no delay on this track. So what I've actually got here instead is that this is being sent to another audio track, and I can see that here. So this is this one here, delay time. So this is actually receiving audio from the send, B delay. And the reason I'm sending this to another audio track is I want to have separate control over this. And I'm using these things called dummy clips, which are, again, if you're unfamiliar with the idea of dummy clips, I've got a video, the same video, dummy clips and follow actions that I will link to. And basically what this allows me to do is automate various things on the delay. So for example, for each song that I do, there's a different delay time. So in this case, this track here, the delay time is a dotted 8th note. And in some tracks, it's a 16th note. So you can see that rather than me having to manually go on there and change the delay time, as soon as I trigger that song, the delay time is playing at the right speed, which is really one less thing for me to think about. So that is really cool. So I've got a number of these dummy clips on some of these tracks here. Now, speaking a little bit more about the routing, you'll notice that a lot of these tracks here don't go straight to the master output. So you notice that, for example, the percussion and the kick bass actually go to the drum bus, which again is just another audio track. So if I come here to this drum bus, you can see that there is, again, this is set to monitor the input. All right, so it's only monitoring what's coming into it. I actually don't need any audio coming in there, so I can set that to no input. So it's just monitoring what's coming into it. In this case, the kick and bass and the percussion are going into the subgroup. And again, on the subgroup, I've got a number of different effects. I've got things like a beat repeat that I can turn on and off. So if I've got some drums playing, I can turn it on and off. Kind of subtle, this one. I've got some other beat repeats here too, where I can loop things. Okay, so you can see that I've got that set up. And what I'm doing is I'm just triggering these with some key maps. So I'm actually just triggering these on my laptop. So I went into key mapping, and some of these effects like F for phalange and B for beat repeat, I can just turn those on and off with my keyboard shortcuts. So that's kind of fun. And again, what I've got is some of these are actually automated on the drum bus. So some of these, for example, I've got filters turning on and off on the drum bus. Okay, and that way for some songs I want to filter things up, some songs I don't want to have a filter, so I can just turn the filter off for these songs that I don't want. And I've got some other effects too, like effectrix, adding some more glitchy kind of effects. So that's the drum bus, and that's only affecting the sort of percussive sounds. And then you'll notice that the drum bus is actually going out to the subgroup. And the subgroup is also where all these other tracks like the stereo and the solo, which is the vocals and stuff, is going out to the subgroup. All right, so again, the subgroup, actually that's what we're looking at before. That's got these beat repeats and other effects on there. So this way I can apply some effects just to, say, the drums, and then I can apply effects to everything which is going out the subgroup. And the drum bus is routed into the subgroup. So that's kind of like affecting everything. Okay, and again, the reason I'm running it through the subgroup rather than on the master channel is I've got these dummy clips which allow me to automate things. So just things like turning effects on and off, that sort of thing. So that's really handy. So that's the main sort of routing going on here. And then I've got some other stuff going on here as well. There's also this loop track, which just on some songs, I've got some extra sort of loops that I want to maybe treat separately, filter separately. Okay, then I've also got keys here that I'm playing on my Churia little MIDI controller keyboard, and at the moment it's just playing an organ, I think. Okay, so you can see that this has got all different keys for different songs, and this is a rack, so this is what's called an instrument rack, and inside this I've got all these different instruments. So the first instrument I've got loaded up here is this organ, which is just a sort of, I think it's just a standard instrument from Ableton. So that just is, on some songs I want to play some organ. On some other songs I might want to play some other keyboard sounds. So for example, in this track, I play this sort of 8-bit lead. So if I trigger this clip, again, what I've got here is these dummy clips on this keys rack track, and that is actually triggering the different instruments. This is using what's called something called a chain selector, which is this little orange line here. And you can see that moving as I trigger one of these clips. You can see that orange line moving, and it's basically selecting a different instrument. So for this one, I've got this sort of nice blippy lead. Okay, I've got some other ones here too. So this song I've got, for example, this nice arpeggiated sort of lead sound. Okay, so for each track, again, when I trigger a scene, I'm also switching the patches. So for, this song, when I trigger the first scene, I'm selecting that instrument. So again, just another thing I don't need to think about. So that's all the different keys going on there, and there's all different instruments. I won't go through all of them. All right, and then I've got this track here called Melodica, which is what I'm actually speaking through right now. This is basically, I've got a microphone plugged in. This is coming through external input 2 of my sound card, and this is just coming into Ableton. I've just got a few effects here, like a noise gate. So if I'm not talking, it cuts any sort of noise or anything like that out. I've got a basic compressor, an EQ, and on one track I'm using an auto pan. So I'm either talking to the audience or I am playing the melodica, which is this guy here. Okay, and so that's just coming through the microphone. And again, what I've got is for different tracks, I can trigger, I've got these dummy clips here that will trigger either no effects, so there's no echo or anything like that, or I'm triggering, for example, delay and reverb on this track. So if I click on that, now if I was to play this, we'll hear some echo. And I've also got one of these MIDI maps, so I can just turn that off with a button on my controller. So if I want to just speak with no echo, I can just press a button. Okay, so that's the melodica track. Basically, that's just a microphone coming in with some effects. Then I've got these three orange tracks here, which are being controlled by the trigger finger controller, which actually Ben Hartley, the other half of Deep Fried Dub, is playing in this live set. And you can see here that I've got a few different instruments here. I've got Battery 4, which is this Native Instruments cool sort of drum, a bit like a drum rack in Ableton. And I probably should actually just make a drum rack, but at the moment I've just got some percussion sounds loaded up. Okay, so that's cool. He can play some percussion sounds. And I've got it set up on the controller. He can do a program change, so it's going to trigger either these percussion sounds and battery or maybe some vocal samples.
'Cause I need to know.
Carrying what's up your niceness.
Time to let go.
Or some big effects hits. Okay, so depending on the track, he can play some different samples and jam along with some percussion. So that's kind of cool. And for this particular set, I've also got some guitars plugged in. So here is another channel here called GAT. And this is basically just getting another input from my sound card. In this case, input 1 from my sound card, which is where my line 6 guitar amp is plugged into. It's like a little pod controller thing. So it's a virtual amplifier. And yeah, so I can play some guitar and some tracks. So that's really the main rundown. And just what else to mention? I think that's pretty much it. Also, notice that when I launch a track, there's also the BPM here. So when I play a track, it's going to launch at the right tempo. I'm not so much doing a DJ set here. I'm not really necessarily trying to mix one track into another track, but sometimes I do. But in this particular case, it's more like a track finishes and then I start playing the next track. Often I'll sort of do a little transition by maybe doing a massive dub out with some echo or something like that, just to tie it over into the next track. So that's a quick rundown on my live set, and I hope you enjoyed this. If you want to learn some more tutorials about Ableton Live, check out my YouTube channel, Sonic Safari, or go to my website, sonicsafari.co, and there's a bunch of different tutorial videos up there. Also, I have a couple of courses up at Udemy. There's one, Synthesis 101 in Ableton Live. That's going to be a whole series using various different Ableton Live synthesizers and some Logic synthesizers as well. So hope you enjoyed this. Until next time, see you later. Bye.